Hi, my name is Bella. My husband and I have been married for 2 years. I had a terrible time finding love until I was 27 years old. I went to an elite middle and high school for girls only, and then I went to a university for women only. After I graduated, I got a job as a receptionist at a big company. As you might expect, all of my coworkers were women. For most of the people in my social circle, business leaders would ask them to parties, but not me. I never went to those kinds of events. It was easy to understand why talking to guys made me so nervous that I couldn't even speak. People often told me how nice I looked, and I was asked out a few times. There were some nice guys at dinner, but they always told me, "You're pretty, but there's not much else to you." After that, it happened. The door to my fate opened. Can I ask Bella to go on a date with me? This is what Lex, who worked for one of our clients and always checked in at my desk, told me. Since he would only give me his contact information, people around us thought we were dating, but it wasn't true. I just smiled at him when he tried to start a conversation, like I did with everyone else. I really thought I would always be single, but when he told me, everything changed. May I suggest that we begin our relationship as friends? That was my answer. Got off guard. He nodded so excitedly that it looked like his head would fall off. He smiled as he walked into the office. I had never done that before. Guy questions like, "Want to have dinner?" had always been the norm up until now. "Free tonight." But when I was with Lex, I didn't get that sense. I only felt love. I was so happy. I went on a few dates with him, but I was still nervous and didn't talk much. The moment I knew he liked me for who I was, I knew. Is it possible for you and I to be together? To the point of tears, he was so happy. All of this took place on Christmas 2 years ago. At that moment, I was very happy and thought I would always have someone so loving in my life. But there was a hole in his armor when his business failed. Now it's been 2 years, and I'm 29. "Lex, you should probably wake up now," I told my husband, who was still asleep. Then I put on my shoes and left the house. I'm the only one making money for our family right now. My husband's business went out of business 6 months ago, and he hasn't had a job since. It's been hard for him to find a job. This business is in a bad field, and the economy is also bad. Sometimes he gets an offer for a job that pays only $2,000 a month, which makes it hard for him to commit to a new job. Even with all of this, I still support him. Our love isn't so shallow that it would fade if one of us lost our job. My pay has always been pretty low. We've never lived a fancy life. We rent a 2-bedroom flat that is more than 30 years old. It's a 30-minute walk from the train stop, and the building isn't safe. But I was ready to give up a lot of things so that we could keep living together. I thought my husband might still be upset about his company going out of business. He had a few job offers, and I waited calmly because I thought he'd find a good fit and feel better. But my hope was short-lived, and he kept getting worse. Even taking out his anger on me by raising his hand sometimes was a sign of his stress. He didn't leave any permanent marks, and I thought he must be hurting more than I was. So I put up with it because I wanted to help. Then, after a few days, he finally got a new job. He quit the business he was in before and went into a whole new one. He took the job because the new place was ready to hire him, even though he didn't have much experience. I felt better when he got it because I knew I wouldn't have to be his hitting bag anymore. I thought he might be getting violent, but it looked like it was just a phase. He is now working hard at his new job and was even given the title of team leader. It's been a year, and I just turned 30. I was excited about having kids soon, but the loving man I married didn't seem to be there anymore. I told you I liked toast. Now tell me why you made pancakes. Also, take out the pit if you're going to serve fruit. Little things started to make my husband mad, and he started saying mean things. "Really, do you need to talk that way? Lex, you're an adult now." I snapped back. "Take out the pit yourself." I was getting angry. In response, he hit the wall with his hand, which scared me. I don't like to argue, but I know in my heart that what he's doing is mental abuse. Recently, I've tried not to upset him, but we've been fighting a lot, and I'm tired of it. When he took it out on me, that's when I lost it. It looked like the stress of his new job was to blame. Soon after, he was made team leader, which showed how good he was. Now everyone tells him he's going to be a department head very soon. He couldn't handle the extra stress, so he started hitting me, who was an easy target. In fact, I quit my job at 30 to stay at home and raise my kids. When I got into my 30s, I'd always planned to quit my job as a receptionist and do something I really enjoyed. Since my husband knew this, I stopped at age 30 as planned. He doesn't seem to like it though. Women need to work too these days. You should know that my pay is enough to take care of both of us. Do you even value the people who have taken care of you? He moans while he eats, then gets his bag and goes to work. I was there for him when he didn't have a job. So why am I being blamed now? That's when I started to mentally distance myself from him. When I got home one day, there were shoes I didn't recognize at the door. There was my mother-in-law in the living room, which caught me off guard. "Whoa, Mom, why are you here?" My mom told me straight out, "Didn't Lex tell you?" When I went up to her, "From today on, I'm moving in." This is something I've never heard before. Over time, I learned that my husband had suggested that my mother-in-law move, and because she was lonely after the death of my father-in-law. Of course, no one asked me that. While I was still shocked, my mother-in-law told me to start making dinner. It shows how valuable a housewife is to take care of her family, so she told her, "Get to work." Even though I was angry and confused, I went to the kitchen to make dinner. Then Lex's mother-in-law came in and said, "Lex hates burgers." The food was almost ready. This is rubbish. The dish was almost done when she threw it away. I was seated inside, but strangely, words failed me when I was faced with this surprise event. I couldn't say anything, so I just listened as my mother-in-law went on. She then started going through the fridge and cooking without asking. I finally calmed down and told my mom, "Hold on." I made a list of meals for the week and then went shopping. As soon as I said that, he dumped flour on my head, making me cough. I kept watching her make her food, and then she told me to clean up. When my husband finally got home, he was thrilled to see the meal. Yes, this is the kind of food I want. It's better to eat fried food than salad. He walked past me and happily sat down to eat with his mom. My heart felt like it had been smashed and black ink had been dropped on it at that moment. Following that, my mother-in-law continued to bother me every day, and my husband continued to hurt my feelings. I felt like I didn't belong in this house, and even though my husband wanted to be close to me, I couldn't because of the situation. As a 30-something woman, I have been putting off having a child because I don't want to have a kid with this abusive man. The last straw finally broke. My wife's mom asked me to take her to the hospital because she was sick. Even though I didn't want to be with her, I had to take her to the hospital, even though I didn't want to. But when I went to get her, a social worker told me to go to a different room. She told her, "You must be having a hard time taking care of the kids and doing all the housework by yourself. But taking it out on your husband and mother-in-law isn't good." It turns out that my mother-in-law was saying that I hurt her when I fell. Even worse, she had been to the hospital more than once and asked about me each time. It looks like she picked today to deal the last hit. The social worker blamed me because she didn't know the whole story. You should look out for kids and old people more. During that time, our family hasn't had any children. When I was told I might need psychological help, I had had enough. You broke my rights, so I'll sue you. It's not you who is being mistreated here, it's me. I showed proof that my husband abused me and that my mother-in-law burned me on purpose. The social worker said she had to check with my mother-in-law, but I told her no and left the hospital by myself. Soon after, my husband and mother-in-law came home. My husband heard from my mother-in-law that I was mean to her. My husband shook his head and said, "You're leaving me, you parasite. How dare you leave my mother?" What kind of lie did my mother-in-law tell you? Based on her fake tears, I think she did it again. I was sick of telling her she was wrong, so I left the house without noticing either of them. I didn't go home that day. Instead, I stayed the night in a work hotel. I was lucky to have my wallet and cell phone with me, and it was easy to find a charger. I chose to avoid both of them for a while and not go back home. But as I walked by the house one day, I saw a woman in her 50s who lived across the street from our apartment. I was beginning to worry. I haven't seen you around. She also told me that your mom told her that you and your husband are going on vacation for about a week. When I heard that, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Then I asked myself, if not now, when? I called the moving company right away and asked them to help me move out as soon as possible. It was a little more expensive, but I didn't have much stuff, and the movers were able to get it all to my parents' house in just 3 days. Let's see how my husband and his mother react, since they have no idea how much I've helped with the house. They put me down when they don't know anything about me, and I won't forgive them. After moving, I went back to my parents' house because their house was empty. After a few days, my husband called me. "Where are you, Bella? There is no one in your room." When my husband found out what was going on, he kept asking me where I was. I told him, "Not your business. By the way, I've already filed for divorce because you've said you wanted to do it before. Sign them and send them in." After I hung up the phone with him, I stopped calling his number. After that, my life became peaceful. I did yoga, made breakfast, and then sat down with my parents at the table. I had lunch with my mom and dinner with my family again. That's how I felt, but it was comfort and happiness I hadn't felt in a long time. When I told my parents to thank you, they were surprised, but they were happy to see me. When my husband found out I was at my parents' house, he waited nearby for me. When I saw him, I tried to run away, but he caught up and grabbed my arm. "Call me Bella. Let's go home. Without you, the house is a mess." I yelled, "Help me," as his hold got tighter. As I was being helped, a high school boy in his sports uniform came by and called the cops. A businessman nearby also helped. Since the cops were there, my husband quietly left. But as expected, my angry mother-in-law stormed into my parents' house. "How dare you make fun of my son in public? Oh, you and your family are a shame." Finally, I stopped my dad from going up to them and told him, while I was doing that, my mother-in-law was outside our house making threats and even talking about defamation lawsuits. Dad was about to lose it and talk to her about it, but I stopped him. "Okay, I'm ready to settle this." I called my husband, who was standing next to my mother-in-law when the call came in. He told her straight out, "I know you're cheating, and I have proof. I'm going to sue you for abuse and get money when we get divorced." My husband became scared when he heard this. After hearing rumors that he was going to a hotel with a coworker, I actually paid a detective to find proof of his cheating. I had a lot of proof. I even went to the hospital and got a note saying I was healthy in case they tried something. I had also recorded talks in case I needed proof. I was going to talk to my husband and his mother about it when I was ready mentally, but I'm not going to be quiet when they insult my parents. My mother-in-law has also been stealing money from my pocket. I've heard that the house is in terrible shape and even smells bad since I left. People in the neighborhood are complaining, right? My husband didn't know what to say. A friend told me this story. They said my husband and his mother were not in town. It looks like they haven't been doing simple things like picking through the trash, and the house has become a dump. Besides that, I heard that the property management gets reports every day about the loud fights they have. Now my husband might understand how much I helped the family and want me to return, but it's too late. I'm not coming back to live happily ever after with your mom. After I said that, I put the phone down. Soon after, my wife's mom tried to break down my front door. They were both arrested after I called the cops. After the fact, my neighbor told me that they hadn't taken care of any of the complaints through the management business. The drama finally got so bad that it cleared out the whole apartment building. The management finally went to court against both of them for not paying rent, ignoring complaints, and making business difficult. They were being sued for money damages. They were finally told by the court to leave and pay money for harm. They can't rent anywhere now because they're on a list of people who can't rent. It turned out that the rent wasn't paid because my husband made a mistake at work that cost a lot of money and caused him to lose his job. He quit his job and moved far away because he couldn't find another place to live in the area. He then ran into another problem when he tried to find new work. He became homeless, which made his mother steal from stores. She was arrested for hitting a store worker who tried to talk to her. I read about this in the news online. I have no idea what comes next, and I don't want to know. When I got divorced, I started working at the coffee shop of my dreams. Someone I work with who is 5 years younger than me and I became friends. I got married again when I was 34. We opened our dream cafe when we were 40, and now I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant at a late age, but I've never been happy.
Starting today, my husband wants us to live with my parents. I was caught off guard by this sudden suggestion. We just said goodbye to my father, who recently passed away after being sick for a long time. Despite the sadness of the funeral still lingering, my husband packed up and left our house. He said we're moving to a villa my father left me. When we got there, my in-laws were already settled in. My name's Natalie, I'm 33, and I'm a designer who's just started living on my own. I've been living with Justin for 3 years now since we got married. My career as a designer is flourishing and I'm known in my field. I earned well enough to have the apartment under my name. Sadly, my mother passed away during my college years, and last year, my father was diagnosed with cancer. Despite his brave fight, the disease progressed, and the doctors warned us to prepare for the worst. My father has always been there for me, especially since I started working. He's been a constant support and a vital part of my life. Learning about my father's illness shook me to the core. As his health deteriorated, I couldn't sleep, consumed by worry and fear. My husband asked about my dad's condition often, but his concern felt hollow. It seemed like he was waiting for the worst to happen. He's always felt insecure about earning less than me, and I wished he'd take pride in my success and be there for me when times get tough. He had a playful side, always wanting to win, even in simple things. My dad assured us not to worry and to focus on our relationship, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we should visit him while we still can. I was finding it harder to hide my growing frustration with my husband. In the beginning, our marriage was full of love and joy, but his insensitive comments about my dad's illness changed things. I realized he wasn't the same loving husband anymore. He works from home and thinks having someone around distracts me, but I plan to work from home too once I'm independent. I decided to rent a small office and commute, making it easier for me to visit the hospital. Meanwhile, my husband stayed home, leaving all the household chores for me to handle. Juggling work, taking care of my father, and coming home exhausted, I often found a mess waiting for me, with dishes left unwashed. It was clear he only thought of himself, disregarding my feelings. Living with him made me realize how little he understood me, leaving me feeling deeply lonely. Then my father passed away. We had already sold our family home as we had discussed with him. As I busied myself with funeral arrangements, my husband seemed distant, more focused on phone calls or disappearing altogether. I pleaded with Justin to help me during this difficult time, but his phone interrupted our conversation. When he finally hung up, he brushed off my request, claiming he was busy with work calls. My frustration with him grew, especially amidst the turmoil of losing my father. His demeanor had turned colder, leaving me feeling even sadder. On the day of the funeral, Justin spent a long time chatting with his parents, leaving me feeling alone among the attendees. Despite the tension, the funeral proceeded smoothly, and we were able to wrap up the proceedings without any major issues. Out of the blue, my husband suggested we move in with his parents, as if it were the most natural thing to do. He even joked about divorce if I disagreed. I couldn't believe how casually he said it, especially considering the recent loss of my father. Fueled by grief and frustration, I retorted, "Live with them where? We don't even have a spare room here." In truth, one room in our apartment served as my husband's workspace, filled with his work stuff. Despite us not having kids, he used the space as if it were his own personal domain. "It's the villa you inherited," he said with a grin. I was taken aback. While we'd sold the family home, the villa held special memories of my father and me. I was determined to keep it that way, but my husband didn't seem to care about my feelings and kept pushing his own agenda. Living in that villa would be tough, I tried to explain, but he brushed it off. His parents had already made plans to move there, likely arranged during the funeral. With its spaciousness and peaceful setting, it was probably an appealing choice for them. Their move was already in motion, leaving no room for me to object. Every time I tried to speak up, my husband's disapproval was evident. "You're always thinking about yourself. Your constant absence because of your father's illness and emergencies has taken a toll on me. Do you even realize how much I've had to endure because of your obsession with your father?" His words were harsh, plunging my world into darkness. "Now that your father is gone, you need to listen to me." His year-long struggle was too much to bear. His callous remarks cut deep, leaving me in disbelief. I didn't want to accept that this was who my husband truly was, but it was clear he had little regard for my father or me. I couldn't shake the memory of my father's pain during his final days in the hospital. My father wouldn't have wanted me to just follow my husband's orders, leaving me behind, and he certainly wouldn't have wanted me to abandon my own feelings. In that moment, any love I had for my husband seemed to disappear. I couldn't shake the feeling of bitterness knowing he was excited about the villa while I was still mourning my father's death. Despite my emotions, I tried to warn him. Living in the villa might not turn out as you expect. I highly doubt that was his response. With that, I had to accept his decision. I packed only the essentials and left our home. My husband looked puzzled at my sparse belongings, but I simply told him I'll come back for the rest later. I couldn't bear to exchange any more words with him. It was painful to see the faces of my in-laws, who I imagined were eagerly awaiting my father's death and were now happily moving into the villa. I followed my husband in silence, unable to bear the thought of my cherished place being taken over by his desires. While technically a villa, it's more like a cozy family home by the sea, nestled in a neighborhood where life is simple and peaceful. Despite its tranquil surroundings, it's conveniently close to the city center, making it a valuable piece of property. As I stepped out of the station, memories of my childhood flooded back. I remembered how my father used to carry me home on his back after I fell asleep on the train ride. When we reached the villa, my in-laws were already there. I couldn't shake the feeling of suspicion, realizing that my husband must have secretly given them a key without my knowledge. This discovery only added to my unease. The realization that my in-laws had schemed to move into the villa without informing anyone only deepened my mistrust. As I looked around, I could see the excitement in their eyes as they envisioned their future in this home. Despite being a single-family house, it was filled with sturdy furniture chosen by my father and slightly different European-style decor that must have appealed to my mother. "What a beautiful villa. It's simply perfect," they exclaimed. "Goodbye to that cramped apartment. We're so fortunate to be able to live here now. The view from the second floor is breathtaking. Your father was clever to keep such a wonderful home a secret. We should all enjoy it together, as a family." Their enthusiastic remarks only fueled my irritation. It seemed like they didn't fully grasp the weight of my father's passing and simply saw the villa as a luxurious home they lucked into. Truly, both the location and the house are perfect. "We're lucky your father left us this splendid villa. We owe him our thanks," my husband chimed in, joining his insensitive parents in laughter. They cracked open beers to celebrate the move, oblivious to the solemnity of the occasion. I sighed as I prepared snacks, watching them tarnish the precious memories I had of my parents at the dining table. I chose to bury my feelings and endure the night. The next morning, the tranquility of the villa was shattered by my mother-in-law's piercing scream. I instantly knew something was wrong. As I woke up and hurried to investigate, I found my father-in-law and husband causing a commotion, slightly delayed in reaching the source of the scream. In the bathroom, my mother-in-law lay on the floor, clutching her foot with a panicked look. "The floor collapsed under me," she gasped, clearly shaken by the sudden event. "But the floor seems fine. You must have just slipped, right?" My husband and father-in-law seemed oblivious to the severity of the situation as they examined the spot she indicated. However, the floorboards appeared smooth and undamaged. Despite their reassurances, she remained adamant. My father wouldn't have wanted me to just follow my husband's orders, leaving me behind. And he certainly wouldn't have wanted me to abandon my own feelings. In that moment, any love I had for my husband seemed to disappear. I couldn't shake the feeling of bitterness knowing he was excited about the villa while I was still mourning my father's death. Despite my emotions, I tried to warn him, living in the villa might not turn out as you expect. I highly doubt that was his response. With that, I had to accept his decision. I packed only the essentials and left our home. My husband looked puzzled at my sparse belongings, but I simply told him I'll come back for the rest later. I couldn't bear to exchange any more words with him. It was painful to see the faces of my in-laws, who I imagined were eagerly awaiting my father's death and were now happily moving into the villa. As they examined the floor, I was certain it had collapsed. "Have you tried stepping on that slightly different colored part of the floor?" I questioned. Their expressions shifted to surprise as they focused on the spot I indicated. Stepping between them, I leaned forward and pressed my slippered foot on the distinct section. Whoa, what was that? The floorboard made a distinct sound and gave slightly under my weight, snapping back into place when I lifted my foot. If someone unknowingly stepped on it, they'd think the floor had collapsed. "See, the floor sinks a bit. It's like a trap," I explained. "What? That's dangerous. Is this house defective?" they exclaimed. Calmly, I clarified, "It's not a defect. My father intentionally installed it in this house." "Why would he do that?" they asked incredulously. "It's what you'd call a mechanical mansion or a trick house," I revealed. As they examined the floor, I was certain it had collapsed. "Have you tried stepping on that slightly different colored part of the floor?" I questioned. Their expressions shifted to surprise as they focused on the spot I indicated. Stepping between them, I leaned forward and pressed my slippered foot on the distinct section. Whoa, what was that? The floorboard made a distinct sound and gave slightly under my weight, snapping back into place when I lifted my foot. If someone unknowingly stepped on it, they'd think the floor had collapsed. "See, the floor sinks a bit. It's like a trap," I explained. "What? That's dangerous. Is this house defective?" they exclaimed. Calmly, I clarified, "It's not a defect. My father intentionally installed it in this house." "Why would he do that?" they asked incredulously. "It's what you'd call a mechanical mansion or a trick house," I revealed. In reality, my father was a devoted ninja enthusiast. This villa was his pride and joy, a treasure he poured his heart and soul into. As a child, I often tagged along while he tinkered with the house's mechanisms or added new ones. That's why there are traps and hidden mechanisms scattered throughout. A shelf you shouldn't touch, a floorboard that gives way when stepped on, a door that requires a specific sequence to open, concealed passageways, and even secret rooms. Every corner of this villa is infused with my father's dreams and ingenuity, cultivated over many years. While it's perfectly suitable for everyday living for me, who grew up here and learned how to navigate all the traps from my father, it's a different story for my husband and in-laws, who are unfamiliar with its quirks. I did warn you that living here would be challenging, and I also mentioned that it's a place filled with my father's memories. My father's intense ninja obsession is pretty well known among her relatives. "It's surprising you didn't know," I remarked. Initially, my husband denied any knowledge, but now he seemed speechless. My in-laws were equally taken aback by this revelation. With our apartment lease already canceled and nowhere else to go, they turned to my husband for guidance on what to do next. Amidst the chaos, both my father-in-law and husband inadvertently triggered another trap, causing them to stumble. As I watched them sprawled on the ground, I couldn't help but chuckle. "Feel free to make yourselves comfortable for as long as you need," I said, my tone more sarcastic than welcoming. They had been enamored by the villa's luxury, ignoring my warnings and showing little interest in my father's peculiar hobbies. Now, they were experiencing the consequences of their oversight. Even my attempts to explain the dangers of the traps fell on deaf ears. "It's no big deal. We'll get used to it," my husband insisted confidently, and I responded with a knowing smile. "I'll head back to the apartment to get things ready for our move," I told them before leaving them at the villa. However, the truth was, I had no plans for moving preparations. Instead, I intended to take a few days off to sort through my father's belongings. As expected, just 2 days later, my husband and in-laws had had enough. During that brief period, I found comfort in being alone, allowing me to slowly regain a sense of positivity as I planned my next steps. Before long, my father's villa gained attention as a unique attraction in the neighborhood. It became known as the Trick Mansion and was regularly featured in local newsletters. Curious visitors would stop by whenever the villa was unoccupied. Looking back, I remembered strangers touring the villa and local children playing nearby, making it a vibrant spot in the community. My father had listed both the villas and our old home's phone numbers in the newsletters. However, with the family home sold, any inquiries would now come to the villa's number. Thanks to my upbringing, I was able to handle calls from foreign visitors as I was proficient in foreign languages. However, my husband and in-laws struggled with foreign languages. In addition to the stress of navigating the villa's traps, they were overwhelmed by unexpected visitors and foreign language calls. Exhausted and sleep-deprived, they retreated to the apartment. "Why don't we all just live here together?" my husband suggested. After eagerly awaiting my father's passing to claim the villa, they were ready to give it up after just 2 days. Instead of offering them tea, I handed my husband divorce papers that I had already prepared and signed. "There's no way we can live together under these circumstances. If you understand, please leave quickly," I said with a heavy heart. I couldn't forgive him for disregarding my feelings and acting insensitively without consulting me or providing any explanation. My husband decided that we would move in with his parents, leaving me with all the household responsibilities, as he had never shared them before. Feeling trapped, I confronted him about his selfish decision-making and disregard for my feelings. "What happened to the love you used to show me?" I couldn't help but laugh at his obliviousness. How could I love someone who wished for my father's death and would rejoice when he passed? Handing him only the divorce papers, I escorted them out of the apartment. "Firstly, this is my apartment. If anyone should leave, it's you." Despite my calm demeanor, my husband raised his voice, showing no concern for our neighbors. However, I remained firm. "Natalie, I'll call the police for trespassing. If you don't want that, leave quietly." Their voices fell silent upon realizing the apartment was in my name. They relied on me financially and didn't have much of their own. However, I had already made up my mind to sever ties before they could begin their lengthy persuasions. Both my husband and in-laws had limited savings. After being forced out of the apartment and unable to return to the villa, they settled into a cheap, low-quality apartment, struggling to make ends meet. They often reminisced about the previous apartment, considering it better. Initially, my husband felt remorseful and apologized frequently. However, as time passed, he became resentful of his parents. With their advancing age, they rarely found stable employment, depleting their savings and pension. Each move only exacerbated their familial discord, as they argued constantly within the thin walls of the apartment. Despite receiving noise complaints, they refused to apologize and instead retaliated, leading to strained relationships with their neighbors. They may soon need to search for another place to live. While my husband used to enjoy working from home, the current apartment lacked the luxury of a dedicated workspace. Struggling to focus on his work, his professional standing and sales took a nosedive. Now he barely makes ends meet with a late-night job at a convenience store and may need to take on multiple part-time gigs to survive. His in-laws regretted allowing their son to dictate their decisions, blaming him for their predicament during their frequent arguments. "If only you had been more responsible, we wouldn't be in this mess. You should have double-checked everything. Don't pin the blame on me. She's the one who kept things hidden," they argued. I remained silent as they continued their accusations. "If only you had communicated better with your father, none of this would have happened. I never imagined we'd end up like this because of our son," they lamented. Yet they had always harbored hopes of inheriting the villa and were elated when my father passed away. I'll never forget that. Following the divorce, I made significant progress in my career as a designer. To cope with my father's passing and these turbulent events, I incorporated ninja elements into my designs, sharing them on social media platforms. Their popularity surged, catching the attention of a major cosmetics company. To my surprise, they approached me for a project, designing packaging with an Asian flair, incorporating ninja elements. It felt like a way to honor my father's memory, so I eagerly accepted the opportunity and poured myself into the work. The project was a resounding success, propelling my career to new heights. With joy in my heart, I shared updates at my parents' graves, grateful for the chance to honor their memory in such a meaningful way. I chose to keep the mechanical house, preserving it as a special place brimming with memories of my father. I began organizing tours and transformed it into a space where both tourists and local children could enjoy themselves free of charge. Soon, the house gained significant media attention, providing much-needed income to cover ongoing expenses. Additionally, online articles about the house were translated into foreign languages, garnering support from international fans. Some of the donations even came from elderly individuals who shared my father's passion for ninjas. I'm committed to maintaining this enchanting place for years to come. Meanwhile, the mechanical house remains a lively center of activity, especially beloved by local children. Is this the famous mechanical house? Where are the surprises? Show us. With the help of dedicated local volunteers, precautions are taken to ensure the children can play safely. Foreign tourists are often amazed by features like the hidden floorboard doors. Wow, this is incredible. I'm so touched to experience such a unique place. What other surprises await? Despite losing my father and going through a divorce over the villa's inheritance, I believe the gains have outweighed the losses. The villa has evolved into a treasure trove of memories shared with loved ones. Through it all, I've experienced personal growth, embracing the future with renewed optimism and hope.